The man in the tailored suit didn't flinch when the first bottle shattered against the wall behind him, a spray of cheap glass and cheaper whiskey barely missing his ear. He just stood there, a specter of calm in a room crackling with rage. The air was thick with the stench of stale beer and desperation, a fitting perfume for the crumbling empire he was here to witness. Before him, a man twice his size, with fists like cinder blocks and a face contorted by a fury that had consumed him whole, was finally letting the last vestiges of his control crumble. This larger man, the supposed king of this small, grimy kingdom of back-alley deals and broken promises, was doing what the weak always do when faced with the unyielding. He was breaking. But the man in the suit, Elias, he was not here to break. He was here to watch. He was here to learn. And he was here to remember. Because not too long ago, he had been the one throwing the bottles. He had been the one screaming at a world that refused to bend to his will. He had been the one drowning in his own suffering, convinced it was a poison meant to kill him. Now he knew better. He knew that suffering wasn't the poison. It was the medicine. It was the fire that either forged a man into steel or melted him into slag. And as he watched this so-called titan of the underworld self-destruct, Elias felt a cold, hard certainty settle in his gut. He had learned to suffer correctly, and in doing so, he was about to inherit a kingdom. What if I told you that every ounce of pain you've ever felt, every betrayal that has ripped your heart from your chest, every failure that has left you gasping for air in the dirt, was not a curse, but a key? A key to a power so profound, so unshakable that the world will have no choice but to bend to your will. We are taught to flee from suffering, to numb it, to pretend it doesn't exist. But what if the only way out is through? What if the path to becoming a king is paved not with gold and comfort, but with the jagged stones of your own agony? This isn't about enduring pain. This is about using it. This is about learning the alchemy of the soul, the secret art of turning lead into gold, of transforming every wound into a weapon. The world has tried to break you. It has thrown its worst at you, hoping you would shatter. But you are still here. You are still breathing. And that means you have the capacity not just to survive, but to conquer. Tonight, we don't run from the fire. We walk into it. We learn its language. We master its heat. And we emerge not burned but forged. This is the code of the Unbent. This is how you suffer correctly and emerge a king. Before Elias wore suits that cost more than most men's cars, he wore the tattered rags of a life gone horribly wrong. He was a creature of the shadows, a man haunted by the ghosts of his own potential. His story began not in a boardroom, but in a damp, forgotten corner of the city where hope was a foreign currency. He had a name then, a different one he had buried along with the man he used to be. That man was a dreamer, a builder, an architect of futures that were supposed to soar. He had a partner, a man he called a brother, and together they had a vision that was meant to reshape the skyline. They poured their souls into a project, a tower of glass and steel that was to be their legacy. They bled for it, starved for it, sacrificed everything for it. And on the eve of their triumph, the brother, the man Elias had trusted with his life, vanished. And with him, every cent of their funding, every blueprint, every promise. He had been gutted, hollowed out, left with nothing but the echoing laughter of betrayal in a vast, empty warehouse that was supposed to be the foundation of their dreams. That was when the suffering began, not the noble, poetic suffering you read about in books. This was the ugly kind, the kind that crawls into your bones and rots you from the inside out. He lost the business. He lost his home. He lost the respect of everyone who had ever looked up to him. He found solace in the bottom of a bottle, in the fleeting oblivion of a chemical haze. He became a ghost in his own life, a spectator to his own decay. He would walk the streets at night, a phantom of a man, and stare up at the skyscrapers that mocked him with their silent, towering indifference. They were everything he was supposed to be, strong, unbending, permanent. He was everything he despised, weak, broken, fleeting. The pain was a physical entity, a lead weight in his chest that made every breath a struggle. He wanted to die. He prayed for the end. But the universe, in its cruel and infinite wisdom, refused to grant him that mercy. It forced him to live, to breathe, to feel the full, crushing weight of his own failure. One night, shivering in an alley that smelled of rain and regret, he saw a reflection in a puddle of grimy water. He didn't recognize the face staring back at him. The eyes were hollow, defeated. The jaw was slack, the fire that had once burned so brightly extinguished. And in that moment, a new kind of pain lanced through him, sharper and more terrifying than anything he had felt before. It was the pain of self-disgust. It was the agony of realizing that he had become a willing participant in his own destruction. The betrayal had been the arrow, but he had been the one twisting it in his own gut, day after day. He had been so focused on the wound that he hadn't realized he was the one keeping it from healing. He had been suffering, but he had been suffering incorrectly. He had been letting it consume him, letting it define him. He was a slave to his pain, a jester in the court of his own misery. That night something shifted. A flicker of the old fire buried deep beneath the ashes of his despair reignited. He looked at his reflection, at the pathetic creature he had become, and he made a vow. He would not be a victim. He would not be a ghost. He would take this suffering, this all-consuming agony, and he would turn it into a weapon. He would learn its contours, its weight, its texture. He would study it like an enemy general studies a battlefield. He would understand its every tactic, its every weakness. And then he would use it to carve a new version of himself out of the wreckage of his old life. He would become unbent. He would become a king, not of a city of glass and steel, but of his own soul. His first act as a free man was to walk away from that alley, to leave the ghost of his old self shivering in the cold. He found a shelter, a place to be anonymous, a place to begin the brutal, agonizing work of his own rebirth. The first lesson in the code of the Unbent is this: you must accept that the pain is real and it is yours. You cannot outsource it, you cannot numb it forever, you cannot pretend it doesn't exist, you must own it. You must look it directly in the eye and say, "You are here, I see you, and you will not destroy me." For Elias, this was the hardest part. The temptation to fall back into the warm, familiar embrace of oblivion was a constant siren song. Every morning he woke up on a lumpy cot in a room full of broken men. The shame of his fall was a physical weight. He had to force himself to feel it, to not flinch from the searing heat of his own humiliation. He had to relive the betrayal, not as a victim, but as a student. He dissected it piece by agonizing piece. He saw his own naivety, his own blind trust, his own arrogance. He saw the red flags he had willingly ignored, the whispers of doubt he had silenced with his own desperate hope. He was not just a man who had been wronged. He was a man who had participated in his own downfall. This realization was not a comfort. It was a second betrayal, a betrayal of the self. But it was also the first taste of true power, because if he had a hand in his own destruction, then he could have a hand in his own reconstruction. The universe wasn't some cruel, capricious God who had singled him out for punishment. It was a mirror, reflecting his own choices back at him. This is the first turning of the key. You stop blaming the world for your suffering and you start taking responsibility for your reaction to it. The pain is a given. The suffering is a choice. You can choose to let it drown you, or you can choose to use it as fuel. You can let the fire burn your house down, or you can use it to forge a sword. What have you been blaming the world for? What pain have you been treating as an external enemy, when in reality it is a part of you? Look at it. Own it. That is the first step to becoming unbent. The second lesson Elias learned in the crucible of his self-imposed exile was the power of deliberate, painful action. He got a job, a menial, back-breaking job that paid him just enough to eat. He hauled garbage, his hands raw and blistered, his body aching with a fatigue he had never known in his previous life of soft chairs and easy decisions. Every morning before the sun rose, he would run. He would push his body to its absolute limit, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming in protest. He ran until the physical pain drowned out the emotional pain, until the only thing that mattered was the next breath, the next step. He was teaching his body a new language, the language of resilience. He was showing his mind that he was not its slave, that he could command his flesh to obey, even when it begged for release. This is the second key. You must forge a new relationship with pain, not as an enemy to be avoided, but as a tool to be wielded. You must seek out voluntary hardship. You must do the things that are difficult, the things that make you uncomfortable, the things that your weaker self screams at you to avoid. Why? Because every time you choose the hard path, you are casting a vote for the person you want to become. You are building a callus on your soul. You are proving to yourself on a cellular level that you can withstand more than you thought possible. The world will inevitably throw involuntary hardship at you. The betrayal, the loss, the failure, that is the price of admission to this life. But if you have trained yourself in the fires of voluntary hardship, you will not just survive the inevitable. You will thrive in it. You will see the storm coming and you will smile, because you know you are the storm. What is the hard thing you are avoiding right now? What is the discomfort you are running from? Go to it. Embrace it. That is the second step to becoming unbent. The third lesson was one of silence and observation. In his old life, Elias was a talker. He was a salesman, a charmer, a man who could bend people to his will with a torrent of words. Now he was nobody, and in that anonymity he found a new kind of power. He learned to listen. He learned to watch. He worked with men who had been to hell and back, men who had lost everything, men who had committed unspeakable acts. And in their stories, in the quiet desperation of their eyes, he saw the universal truths of human suffering. He saw the same patterns, the same mistakes, the same flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished. He stopped seeing his own pain as a unique, personal hell and started seeing it as a part of the human condition. He was not alone in his suffering. He was just another soldier in the eternal war against despair. This is the third key. You must depersonalize your pain. You must understand that your suffering, while it feels all-consuming, is not a special punishment reserved just for you. It is the rain that falls on everyone. The king and the pauper both shiver in the cold. The hero and the villain both bleed when they are cut. When you understand this, your ego begins to dissolve. The self-pity, the why me mentality that keeps you trapped in a cycle of victimhood begins to lose its power. You are not the main character in a tragic play. You are a part of a vast, interconnected web of human experience, and in that connection there is strength. There is a quiet dignity in knowing that you are walking a path that has been walked by billions before you and will be walked by billions after you. Your pain is not a brand of shame. It is a badge of membership in the human race. Look at the people around you. Look beyond their masks, their carefully constructed facades. See their struggles, their fears, their quiet acts of courage. See yourself in them and them in you. That is the third step to becoming unbent. The fourth lesson came to him in a moment of unexpected grace. He was sitting on a park bench after a grueling day of work, watching the city lights flicker to life. He was tired, he was sore, and for a moment the old despair threatened to creep back in. He closed his eyes, and instead of fighting it, he simply observed it. He watched the thoughts of failure and regret drift through his mind like clouds in the sky. He felt the familiar ache in his chest, the phantom weight of his past life. But he did not attach himself to it. He did not judge it. He did not try to push it away. He simply let it be. And in that space of non-resistance, something miraculous happened. The pain began to lose its power. It was still there, but it was no longer him. It was just a sensation, a thought, a memory. It was a storm passing through, but he was the mountain. The storm could rage, but it could not move the mountain. This is the fourth key. You must practice the art of detachment. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the silent observer behind them. This is the core of Stoic philosophy, the secret weapon of emperors and warriors for thousands of years. The world can take everything from you, your wealth, your status, your freedom, even your life. But it cannot take your ability to choose how you respond to what happens to you. Your mind is the one fortress that can never be breached unless you leave the gates open. Most of us live our lives as prisoners of our own minds. We are tossed about by every wave of emotion, every gust of negative thought. But you have the power to step back, to create a space between the stimulus and the response. In that space lies your freedom. In that space lies your power. The next time you feel the grip of anger, of fear, of despair, do not fight it. Do not surrender to it. Simply observe it. Watch it rise and fall like a wave, and know that you are the ocean, vast and deep and unmoved. That is the fourth step to becoming unbent. The final lesson, the one that transformed Elias from a survivor into a king, was the lesson of purpose. He had spent years rebuilding himself from the ground up. He had forged a body of iron and a mind of steel. He had learned to own his pain, to wield it, to depersonalize it, to detach from it. But he was still missing one crucial ingredient. He had a shield, but he had no sword. He had a fortress, but he had no kingdom to rule. He realized that suffering correctly was not just about becoming unbreakable. It was about using that unbreakable strength for something greater than himself. It was about taking the wisdom he had forged in the fire and using it to bring order to the chaos, to create value in a world of decay. He left the city that had broken him and then remade him. He took the small amount of money he had saved and he began to build again. But this time he was not building with glass and steel. He was building with people. He found other broken men, men who were lost in their own suffering, and he showed them the path he had walked. He didn't offer them sympathy. He offered them a code. He offered them the tools to forge their own strength. He started a business, a legitimate one that was built on the foundation of second chances. He hired the men that society had discarded, the ex-convicts, the addicts, the failures. He demanded more from them than anyone ever had. He pushed them to their limits, forced them to confront their own demons just as he had. And in doing so, he built an army of unbent men, loyal not to him, but to the code that had saved them. This is the final key, the one that unlocks the throne room. You must find a purpose that is greater than your own pain. Your suffering cannot be the center of your universe forever. At some point, you must turn your gaze outward. You must take the strength you have cultivated and use it to serve something beyond your own survival and comfort. This is what transforms a man from a mere survivor into a king. A king is not a man who has no problems. He is a man who has problems so large that his own personal suffering becomes insignificant. He is a man who is so consumed by his mission, by his purpose, that he does not have time for self-pity. He is a man who suffers, yes, but he suffers for his people, for his kingdom, for his vision. And in that suffering, there is a profound and unshakable joy. What is your mission? What is the fire that burns within you, the thing you would be willing to suffer for? Find it, nurture it, and let it consume you. That is the final step to becoming a king. And so we return to the room with the shattered glass and the broken man. The man on the floor, the so-called king, was now just a whimpering child, his rage spent, his power a phantom. He had suffered, yes. He had faced betrayal and loss and the crushing weight of his own ambition. But he had suffered incorrectly. He had let his pain turn him into a monster, a tyrant, a man who ruled through fear because he was a slave to his own. He had never learned the code. He had never understood that true power is not the ability to inflict pain on others, but the ability to transform your own. Elias walked slowly, his footsteps the only sound in the now silent room. He knelt down, not in pity, but in a final act of observation. He looked into the eyes of the broken man, and he saw the ghost of his former self, the man in the alley, the man who had chosen to be a victim. You think this is power. Elia's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. This rage, this destruction, this is the tantrum of a child in a man's body. You had a kingdom and you burned it to the ground because you were cold. He stood up, towering over the wreckage of a life poorly lived. Suffering is not a license to be cruel. It is an invitation to be great. It is the final ingredient that separates the boys from the men, the pawns from the kings. You were given the fire and you used it to burn yourself alive. I was given the fire and I used it to forge a crown. Elias turned and walked out of the room, leaving the broken man to his broken kingdom. He did not look back. He had a city to run, an army of unbent men to lead, a purpose to fulfill. He was no longer a man defined by his suffering. He was a man defined by what he had built from it. He was a king, not because he sat on a throne of gold, but because he had built a throne out of his own spine. He had learned the most important lesson of all, that the world will always try to bend you. It will hit you with storms, with traitors, with failures, with pain. But it cannot break you unless you consent to be broken. The power to choose is always yours. You can choose to be the shattered glass on the floor, or you can choose to be the unbent man who walks away. What about you? You have felt the sting of betrayal. You have known the cold embrace of failure. You have tasted the bitter ash of regret. The fire is upon you. The pain is here. It is real, and it is yours. What will you do with it? Will you let it consume you? Will you let it turn you into a victim, a ghost, a whimpering child? Or will you stand up, look it in the eye, and begin the work? Will you own it? Will you wield it? Will you see it as the universal price of greatness? Will you detach from its drama and see it for what it is, just energy, waiting to be transformed? Will you find a purpose so grand that your personal suffering shrinks in its shadow? The path is not easy. It is a path of voluntary hardship, of brutal self-honesty, of relentless discipline. It is a path that most will not choose. They will choose the comfort of victimhood, the warm blanket of blame, the easy oblivion of distraction. But you are not most people. The very fact that you are here, that you have listened to this, means that there is a flicker of the unbent spirit within you. There is a part of you that knows you were made for more than just quiet desperation. There is a king within you, waiting to be forged. So I ask you, what is the first step you will take right now to begin suffering correctly? What is the hard thing you will do? What is the pain you will own? Share it in the comments below. Declare your intention. Make a vow not to me but to yourself. Join the ranks of the unbent, because we are building an army of men and women who are not afraid of the fire, an army of souls who have learned to turn their wounds into weapons, an army of kings. The code has been given to you. The keys are in your hand. The throne is waiting. The only question that remains is, will you have the courage to claim it? Do not let this be just another video you watch, another fleeting moment of inspiration. Let this be the moment you decide, the moment you stop running from your suffering and start using it, the moment you choose to become unbent, the moment you start your ascent to the throne. Your journey does not end here, it begins. And I will be watching. We all will be. Welcome to the kingdom.